Hello and welcome to the Counterpoint podcast. Today we're going to be talking about extended reality, so covering virtual reality and augmented reality. And to do that, I'm joined by two analyst colleagues. So we have Khan Chowan. Hi, Khan. How are you today?
Hi, Peter. I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, very well. And we're also joined by Harmeet Singwalia. How are you doing today, Harmeet?
Hey Peter, I'm doing very well, thank you.
Great. Yeah, so we're going to be talking about extended reality, which has been having a quite a difficult transition from a futuristic fantasy-like concept into something which is practical and revenue generating. I mean, there are a couple of things that have happened recently which give us cause for optimism about the technology. First being the launch of the Oculus Quest 2, so the second generation of the Oculus Quest standalone virtual reality headset, which is built on a Qualcomm Snapdragon XR2 platform, and has brought new levels of power to the standalone product. It's improved the optics quite a bit from the first generation and some other standalone products. Still not quite there. And then at the other end of the price scale, so the Oculus Quest 2 retail starts at $299. But then at the other end of the price scale, we have last week the launch of the Vario um, third generation platforms, both a virtual reality and a mixed reality headset. Now, these are aimed very much at the enterprise market, and they retail from in the $3,000 range and upwards. But they really kind of solve the problem of optical quality. So there are various techniques that they use, which really do mean that you feel much more immersed in the environment. So a couple of things that have really, in my mind at least, kind of moved the game forward. But guys, let's get into a discussion about what we see happening here. So let's start off by looking at the hardware developments that um, can potentially start driving consumer adoption of extended reality. So, Hami, what would you see as the most important hardware developments here that we're seeing?
Right, Peter. I think as you already mentioned, optics are one of the issues that people look at. Another that I think is very important, especially for gamers and daily users rather than enterprise, would be the form factor. How comfortable a device is, what its weight is, what is the size. Again, as you already, I think, mentioned about standalone versus tethered, especially in gaming, I think standalone is being preferred over tethered. Besides that, we also have audio and gesture recognition. Consumers seem to prefer 3D audio, so it feels as if you're listening to someone in the room rather than in a virtual world. Similarly, with gesture recognition, that is another of the preferred features and higher battery life. Now, again, it also depends on who the exact consumer is, what their aims are. So there are various permutations and combinations, but I think form factor, optics, audio, gesture recognition, battery life, and if these can be improved, they would drive consumer adoption in the near future.
Okay. Um, and if I can ask you to add on to that, Khan, I mean, something that we're expecting is the launch of augmented reality glasses from potentially Apple in the next, let's say, 2 years or so. Um, what needs to happen there?
Yeah, Peter. So, adding to Hamid points and all. So, when you look into the AR part, in which we will launch the AR glasses by maybe 2022 and 2023. So they are also looking into these hardware developments. Like Hermes rightly said that the form factor will be the main key factor, because if you not in VR but in AR, if you see, the form factor should be comfortable and light. It should also be stylish, like a normal glass. And again, like it should be longer battery life, survive throughout a day at least. and also the overall user experience improvement should be there. And Apple is right now just I would say waiting for a right time. They just don't want to ruin their consumer experience with their first edition of device. They just want to play on the success of like they did with the AirPod and smartwatch type of things. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the smartwatch analogy is a good one actually because Apple is you could argue that Apple has really kind of made that sector. They dominate the smartwatch space. Obviously, there were smartwatches before, but it took Apple to really kind of transform that into something which is as big and valuable as it now is. So in a sense, we could argue that the augmented reality space is waiting for its Apple moment. And if we, and I know that during this conversation we're gonna sort of slip from VR to AR, and they are very different, albeit related technologies. So that's why we tend to use the catch-all term XR, so for extended reality. But if we look at the different sectors that can potentially benefit from the use of XR. I mean, Harmeet, you mentioned gaming as a big one, and I think a lot of people naturally think that, at least in VR, gaming is the big one. But are there other sectors that could be as important or even potentially more important as we look forward here?
Uh, at the moment, gaming is what dominates the XR field. A vast majority of the XR devices being sold are gaming devices, which is why one sees Oculus and Sony as the two biggest brands in the market. Uh, but XR has a lot of other use cases in various other segments, sectors, consumer segment, enterprise segment. There are lots of use cases there. XR has a lot of benefits in the education field, especially now that we are moving into study from home, work from home. As XR is considered an immersive technology, it enables education to be delivered in a slightly more interactive, engaging, and indeed immersive manner. So education has a lot of use cases, the details of which we can go into later. But similarly, we have in healthcare, in engineering, manufacturing, um, video entertainment, which includes concerts, exhibitions, and sports events and museum visits, etc. So there are lots of other segments which can be seen as the future of XR. Because at the moment, while there are some use cases and while there are some applications in each of those, they're not being exploited to their full potential due to limited development, limited options available to the consumers. But there definitely are a lot of other segments which can benefit from XR in the coming future soon.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, thanks. And Khan, do you would any thoughts on this from you?
Yeah, so to adding to the Hamid's point, so right now, for sure, gaming is the biggest segment which is driving the XR volume right now, because I think uh, it- roughly more than 90% of the buyers for the VR headset are from the gamers community. Apart from that, like other sector who are just driving the VR segment right now, that is from like watching videos, like watching live event streaming and all. But for the longer term, we are seeing that AR enterprise will be the big segment in that, like healthcare, manufacturing, and the job training. Like for example, someone has to install a machinery in a factory, so they just give the instruction over a remotely area and just install that. And if you have to just assist the engineers to repair and just repair the equipment, you can do it by that. Because in AR enterprise, the I would say price, form factor, and battery life is not of a concern for them, because if, like for example, if you're buying a 50 $6,000 AR device, and it is just giving you the value of maybe, like, let's say 100K of value, then it's like a good deal for them.
Yeah. Okay. So coming back on the hardware, we talked at the top of the podcast about resolution, and I remember the very first time that I tried a VR headset. I was quite excited about the prospect, but when I put it on, I was I was so kind of disappointed with the resolution. It was, you can't see me, but I wear glasses. I'm short-sighted, and putting on the headset, it was like I'd taken my glasses off, and I was asking the person who was demonstrating, is there some way to adjust it so I can, bring the visuals into sharp focus? And they said, well, that's it. That's as good as it gets. And for me, it was like looking at the world without my glasses on, so that everything was fuzzy. And I quickly learned that this is just the way it was, right? In the early days. And it's gotten a lot better. But when I bought Quest 2, and I wasn't expecting a massive improvement, and it's better, but I still can't read small text that might be in an image, and looking at video is like looking at a YouTube video, a 240 resolution rather than HD resolution. So it's moved forward, but it's still not quite there. Uh, and I think the other things that have been lacking is content, right? So looking at available content, we've moved forward, but still not much. So, I mean, what are your views on things that are getting better, and when can we expect to have these big leaps forward on both hardware and software? So let me start with you, Harmeet.
Right, Peter. I think you're exactly right about certain optical problems with various XR devices. They have far too many shortcomings even now, and I think we are seeing some improvement, but I think progress has been slower than one would have expected. Similarly, in content, while there are far too many manufacturers available, there are lots of brands which are producing XR devices. Content is not being produced at the same level, but I think we can see some solidification in terms of, for instance, in China, because of Mandarin being the primary language. So regions with similar languages are going to be able to produce content at a relatively faster pace, hopefully in the coming future. So we may be able to see some progress as far as content is concerned. And besides that, I think progress, at least so far, has been slower than one would have hoped. And maybe with the entry of newer brands, possibly with Apple's entering this field, we might see other players jumping in too and making the sort of change that has so far not been available.
Yeah, and maybe one big change that's happening now in the broader telecom space is the emergence of 5G, and in a lot of the promotional material around 5G, extended reality is often talked about. So, Khan, do you think that 5G is a major enabler here, or is that just marketing speak?
Yes, 5G will be a key enabler for XR mass adoption, because if you see, 5G is providing high speed data rates at low latency, which is a ideal scenario for using XR devices. Because when you are using XR devices, they are providing you a real time content. So for real time content, we need a strong network. And at the same time, if you see, in smartphone you can only download a video and kind of things, but in XR devices you are downloading actually a whole environment around you. So this will also push telecom operators to help and support this ecosystem, to just to fasten the adoption of the XR devices, because in smartphone there is a very limitation in consuming data, because if you just want to download a movie or something like that, you will need only maybe 1 GB, 1.5 GB of data. But in XR devices, maybe you have to download a game, or if you have to play a game, you need like a 5 or 6 GB of data. And if there is more data, that will be more beneficial for telecom operators, and then it will be a revenue generator for telecom operators.
Okay. And we can tell that you're working remotely by the traffic going past the window. But that's been the way since we've been doing these podcasts. So yeah, and I think it's interesting you bring up the point about the pandemic. And Harmeet, you mentioned earlier about the potential to do education remotely, and actually I saw just last week that a company, in the UK at least, Christmas parties for companies is a standard thing, right? So most companies will put on some sort of Christmas celebration for their employees, but obviously within the limitations of the COVID situation, they haven't been able to do that. But at least one company I heard of is sending out VR headsets to all of the employees so they can put them on a particular day, and they're going to join in a virtual party over VR. So, is COVID, do you think, Harmeet, accelerating the adoption of, or likely to accelerate the adoption, or at least the development of XR technology?
That seems about right, actually. COVID has definitely forced, as Gan also mentioned earlier, us to work and study from home. So we are already experiencing what that feels like. And what it also does is it enables people to realize what the shortcomings of working and studying from home are. Especially with education, it's not necessarily as engaging or interactive. And XR is a technology which has the capacity to bridge those gaps that have been there. And not only can XR enable distance learning without losing much of the impact, let's say, of in-person education, it also can make it better than regular education is. Imagine in a chemistry lab, somebody being able to do experiments without necessarily facing the consequences. That enables quicker breakthroughs beyond even STEM, for that matter. In humanities, if one wishes to see what the Axis powers path, let's say from Germany to Belgium was, one doesn't need to take a flight and go down, as several students in schools, especially in Europe, I think, do at the moment. Similarly, one doesn't have to go to Egypt to experience the pyramids. So teachers can show various in whichever field they are, whichever subject they teach. There are lots of applications there, and I think and that may not necessarily happen in the very near future, but that those applications and those solutions are going to enable studying from home and working from home much more usefully and much more practically than it is currently. But of course, it's because of COVID that people are even thinking about that at the pace that they are. Before this, it was a much slower progress to adding on to what was available already, I would think.
Yeah, it's a very interesting and engaging idea, and certainly, I mean, one of the books that I read that was able to help me kind of understand the potential of VR was Ready Player One, which obviously was made into a film a couple of years ago. But the book which I think was published in 2010, 2011, the main character goes to school in VR. So his entire schooling is done using virtual reality. He has to complete all his assignments to be able to stay in that school. But it feels like we are still a long way from that. But I think, as you say, that the pandemic is potentially kind of driving that a little bit faster towards some sort of reality. But in the enterprise space, I mean, we touched a little bit on this earlier, but there are again a lot of potential applications. And Khan, I think you and I both attended the launch of the Varjo new Varjo products last week. Can you expand a little bit on the enterprise application as well?
Yes, we have attended the Vario session with you. So what I seen that like Vario is producing very high quality devices, which is necessary to serve the enterprise users. If you compare the likes of Oculus and HTC VR devices with Vario devices, there is a huge price difference, and that is only because of Vario is providing like high quality components, uh, more comfortable form factor and high quality cameras and all to address the enterprise segment. And to elaborate on the enterprise application, after like healthcare, manufacturing and all, um, uh, I would say maybe movie industry and these web series industry will also comes into the picture. They may produce XR level movies and web series to serve these consumers, and maybe just organizing the live events, the live events, playing the e-sports and all.
Yeah, yeah, and I think one of the most kind of interesting applications that I've seen, at least Vario demonstrating, is flight simulators. And flight simulators, I mean, talking here about proper flight simulators for fast jets or helicopters, traditionally have been hugely expensive devices on hydraulic jacks that trainee pilots can sit in and go through the motions of flying. But they're now able to do that using VR headsets, and they still sit in a simulator. But because it's they're using mixed reality, so that the cameras are able to show their hands in the cockpit, but all of the display in the the external environment is virtual. But their hands are real, so they're on the real controls, but they're able to read the instruments, see what's happening outside as though it were real. And I think that's transforming the way in which flight training is happening, and they can run through actual missions in a military situation, apply different environments, whether it's night, whether it's raining, different wind conditions, and so on. And it, for as you say, the headsets are expensive, but they're a fraction of the cost of a real flight simulator. And actually, what Vario told us was that they can actually put the everything, including the seat, into a large Peli case and transport that around. So now you can actually move a flight simulator to the people rather than bring the people to the flight simulator. So changes the dynamic tremendously for a lot of enterprise applications. So it kind of trying to bring this towards a conclusion. So looking ahead to the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years, if I could turn to each of you, starting with you, Harmeet. So what do you see as the the likely adoption rates of different technologies here? Maybe looking at it by region. So I think where we are now, the US and China are the two big players within the VR or XR space. Do you see that continuing, or how should we think about this over the next few years?
Uh, right. I think you're right. North America is not only currently the biggest player, biggest XR market. I think we can expect it to continue remaining the biggest XR market in the next several years, at least next 5 years. China too, although China has had some experience with VR devices, especially with the cheap smartphone clip-in XR products. As 5G comes into play in China, more same language content is produced. China is going to become an even bigger, even more influential XR market. But Europe too, especially because of enterprise adoption of XR, we can see Europe remaining a major player of the major XR market. And Asia Pacific, the rest of Asia Pacific outside of China has some extremely important influential XR markets. Japan with strong indigenous players and content creators. South Korea, which is the home of esports. Besides that, we have Taiwan. We have Australia, New Zealand. So Asia Pacific is going to be almost as big as Europe. So we see all of these regions to remain strong and continue and growing at a very healthy rate. Although, of course, we expect China to grow extremely fast, faster than the remaining the other three regions that I just spoke of. And the rest of the world, the current base is extremely small. So although we expect it to grow extremely fast, it's still going to remain a relatively modest XR market, I would expect.
Okay. And Khan, just to bring us to a close, do you have anything to add to that?
So yes, currently the XR industry is going in a good direction, I would say. After seeing the push from the Qualcomm XR platform and the devices like Oculus Quest 2, and in a short term, maybe in the next 1 or 2 years, 5G will be a key enabler to push further this industry. And after these network and devices and all, but I would say inflection point I'm seeing when Apple will introduce its AR glasses.
All right. So looks like we have a lot of the conditions coming together to finally start to kind of drive this market after a pretty bumpy last 10 years, I would say. But certainly, from my perspective, I'm seeing, some quite interesting developments that, give me hope that we're, moving towards that inflection point when growth starts to really happen. But I think you're right, Khan, that, it probably takes, Apple entering the augmented reality market to make that happen. But it's there are a lot of challenges in that space that I think Apple will only launch if they feel that they've satisfactorily overcome those challenges. But anyway, let's wrap it up here. I think there's lots more that we can come back to and talk about in a future edition of this podcast. So thanks, Harmeet. Thanks, Khan.
Thanks, Peter.
All right. Have a great day, guys. And for everyone listening, we hope you've enjoyed this. And check back for the next edition of the Counterpoint podcast. Thanks very much. Have a great day. Bye now.